Hey mums, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk about things that I didn't understand until I became a mum. So I had my son 15 months ago and I'm due with my second baby in August, so really soon. And I thought I would reflect on some of the things that I have learnt as a mum over the last year and a half. And there's a lot of things that I didn't expect coming into motherhood, or a lot of things that I didn't read about online or wasn't told. And I think a lot of that was because I didn't have other friends with children at that time who were close by. I had another friend who had had her baby about a month before me, but hadn't been a mum long enough probably for me to learn a lot of these things from her. The first couple of months are actually the easiest. Your baby sleeps a lot, it's easier to keep them in a routine, they stay in the one spot, they're not crawling all over the place. And when you go out, they'll sleep, but if they have that nap, it's okay. They're not going to miss all their other naps for the rest of the day. Whereas once they start to get that bit older, I was always under the impression that them becoming more independent would make things a lot easier, and that's so not the case. Even though Hunter was sleeping longer stretches by the time he was 6 months old onwards, he was having less nap time during the day. He wanted a lot more attention, even though he was obviously able to do more things, and I actually found that that was a lot more difficult than the initial part. I think the reason why the initial first 2 months feel so difficult is because of sleep deprivation, and that's something that I definitely learned even now while I'm pregnant again, is that things just seem so much harder when I'm sleep deprived or haven't slept very well or rested or anything like that. And that's just purely because as a mum, your body keeps going. Like, you don't stop. Even when you're asleep, your body is still going. You're still getting up throughout the night, and you never have a clock off time like you do when you had a 9-to-5 job. So sleep deprivation is definitely a major killer. I think that it makes parenting seem so much harder than it actually is. And there are definitely some difficult days, but I think that they definitely don't seem as hard when you are well rested. Even when you've got other people around to help you on that day, if you've not slept well, then generally it still feels like it's 10 times harder than it is. And I'm definitely feeling that with this pregnancy at the moment, trying to raise a toddler, because sometimes it all just does feel too hard to do that extra load of washing that would have taken me about 5 minutes to do. But relative to that is that nap times are really not a break for us. Obviously they're a bit of downtime from the constant nagging or attention that a child needs, but in reality, I mean, the first couple of months, sure, you were able to sit there because they had enough nap times that you probably could get a Netflix movie out during the day, and there wasn't a lot that you could do to entertain them, so I'm sure that you could do that. But the reality is that the newborn stage lasts such a small amount of time, and when they do start to become that more active and everything, their nap times are not your downtime to just sit and chill out or have a shower or anything like that. For me, they are to clean, because I find that even though I used to love cleaning of night time, that's the only time that you get as a family with your partner, because that's when they're home to see their child. And I remember that Tom worked away Monday to Friday a lot for probably 9 months of Hunter's life, and so on a weekend I didn't want the house to be dirty, because I didn't want him to be cleaning on the 2 days that he got with his son out of 7, because he didn't see him during the week, not even overnights, except for FaceTime for 5 minutes. So I definitely don't think that nap times are just for chilling out. I definitely did have a bit more chill out when we were living apart, just because of a night time. I didn't have my partner around, that I didn't feel guilty staying up and cleaning the house, but I would never leave the housework for a weekend if I could avoid it, just because of that reason, that I wanted him to spend time with our son. Mum guilt is not just for overprotective mums. I did not realize the level of mum guilt that I would have having a baby, and just over simple things of my breastfeeding journey. At first, all I wanted to do was pump and feed via the bottle. I didn't actually want to latch, and I remember that they told me the only way I could hold him because he was in an incubator was for me to actually feed him myself. And there was so much guilt those first few days because my body was starting to dry up with him being in the incubator. And on about day 4 or 5, my milk finally came back in, but I had so much guilt from the possibility that I wasn't able to breastfeed. There was a lot of mum guilt around the fact that I had a C-section, even though, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love my C-section, but I remember like just when I went to go and have my son and a midwife telling me that I wasn't even trying by having a C-section, even though there was reasons for it. Other things like I don't leave my son to just go and get my hair cut or my nails done or anything like that because I get a lot of guilt around the fact that that's a lot of quality time that he will miss out on, that he'll never get back. And when he's older, obviously he's going to be busy with school and stuff like that, and we only really get school holidays, and then they get older and they move out. So there's a lot of mum guilt around that. There's so many things that you get mum guilt around. Simple things like, even I went and got my whooping cough needle redone the other day because I needed to have it before this baby's due, and I remember feeling so much guilt just because he got really upset that I was getting a needle. And it wasn't even something that I'd like physically done to him. It was just that he was scared, and so I felt bad. There's so many things. Some things are little, some things are big. But the level of mum guilt, even when you're not being an overprotective mum, definitely is so much there. I remember probably one of the biggest things that I had a lot of guilt over was moving. We moved 3,000 kilometers away from family, and we had to make a decision between having secure employment and being around our families, and there was a lot of guilt around that, about the fact that my son would grow up without seeing his grandparents all the time and what that would mean for him. And so yeah, I think that it's definitely something that they don't talk enough about. I think they very much picture mum guilt as a bad thing, even though it's just a natural part of parenting and instinct. And I think that they picture it as if us mums are being overprotective or doing something wrong, but it's actually just us being compassionate. There's a lot of things I've learned about friendship through having a child. So one of the big things is that it's actually really difficult to make mum friends successfully. So obviously you can go to mums groups and stuff like that, and it's great because you have somewhere to go to meet these people, but it's actually really difficult to translate a meeting into a friendship because a lot of parents mums are so busy that they don't follow up and message you to catch up again, or a lot of mums are so skeptical about catching up because they'll see one thing online about the way that you raise your child, and suddenly, because that doesn't fit in with their guidelines, they won't catch up. It's also really difficult to catch up sometimes because as your children become different ages, they have different nap times, and it doesn't always work out to catch up. That can make it somewhat difficult as well to have your own personal friendships outside of having a child as well. I think that the biggest problem with having mum friends is the judgment, and it's not necessarily that people are being horrible or intentionally being judgmental, but at the end of the day, we are all doing what we think is right for our child. Some of us research, some of us really don't, but I think the thing is that the second that there is a difference in opinion, most mums can't just agree to disagree. A lot take it very personally or have to take it a little bit too far, and they suddenly can't be friends with someone because one person did formula feeding by choice and one person did breastfeeding by choice. And yeah, so I think that's actually one of the biggest things that cause mum friendships to fail, is the judgment around a lot of that, and the fact that we can't just admit that we're allowed to have different opinions and our children are allowed to be different. So that's something that I definitely had to learn the hard way. When it comes to friends that you've had pre-baby, I found that I didn't realize my opinion of them would change so much, and I think you almost become snobby in a way because you realize a lot of things in your friends that you also did yourself before children, and you start to think things of like how lazy you might have been because you didn't manage your time as well as you could have now, like compared to now that you have a baby, you get so much more done in that time. Or there's a lot of things like some friends who don't have children obviously are very judgmental of things because they don't understand you having children, but also I think that they focus on a lot of things that you now regard as non-important. So no one really cares about what makeup artist is in what drama or who is on the front of the newspaper that week. You start to notice a difference in priorities, and I think that it does make you form different judgments of the way that you used to view your old friends. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you don't like your friends anymore, it's just that your opinions of things have changed. Something I wish I knew before breastfeeding was that feeding in public is not actually the issue. The issue with breastfeeding is that I've noticed so much the second that you decide to be proud of breastfeeding and admit that, you know, it's an accomplishment, that you made it to 6 months, you made it to 12 months, you made it to 4 weeks, whatever you did, so many people seem to take offense or feel like you are shaming formula mums. And I think that a lot of people forget that breastfeeding is actually a much lower rate than formula feeding. And even though there's a lot more support out there for breastfeeding than formula feeding, like we have lactation consultants and a lot more groups and information on that than formula mums do when they have to switch to or want to switch to formula, I think that people definitely forget that after 6 months, only 30% of mums actually breastfeed, and it is actually such a small number now that formula is the normal compared to breastfeeding. And something that I didn't realize was that it was almost frowned upon for you to think of breastfeeding as an accomplishment, because it is actually really difficult. And something that I learned was that it's not as easy as just attaching your child and feeding them. Your supply is actually something that you have to work on, and it's really not easy. Same with pumping. Pumping is not as simple as plugging a machine in and just sitting there for an hour or 2 hours, or you know, it's really not that simple. And so something that I did realize is that even though obviously there are a lot of mums out there who do feel shamed for formula feeding, there is almost just as much of an issue in reverse of formula mums thinking that breastfeeding mums are not allowed to celebrate what they're doing either. And I think that it's just a really toxic environment, because there shouldn't really be any discussion about either way. It should be a celebration that it's amazing that we even have the technology to have formula to feed babies and keep them alive. But at the same time, it should also be celebrated that the art of breastfeeding has not been lost, because it is actually at a point where it is such a low thing, and it doesn't really happen that much compared to formula feeding these days long term. So I definitely learned a lot when it came to breastfeeding and the way that society accepts a lot of it. Something that really shocked me is doctors and their knowledge of babies is actually really terrible. Something as simple as introducing solids to your babies, I would have assumed that doctors would be the best person you could possibly talk to, and I was so wrong. Even midwives and nurses are not up to date with the standards. There was a 2003 study for baby-led weaning, which is the most up-to-date research, and if you think about it, we're now in 2019, so by now you would think that they were all up to date with the guidelines by World Health Organization. And so many doctors I went to did not know about it, were not educated on it, and I found that that was really shocking, because I didn't understand how us as first-time mums were supposed to make an educated decision when we were trusting people who didn't actually keep themselves up to date with the research that they really should be before providing advice. So I think that doctors really shouldn't be providing advice on things like introducing solids, and that's just purely because they're not up to date with it, so they can't help you make an informed decision whether it is that puree is better for your child or not. I think that was something that was very alarming to me, and it's always made me question a lot of other things that I go to ask GPs about, because I just think if you don't even know the basics on what the most recent studies are and what's best on feeding them, then how are you supposed to know any of these other things that could also be just as critical, because there is just so much information out there, and I would have expected that they would be the people to know this and educate us on this. And I think that as a mum, there is so much out there that you need to research yourself, because the information just will not be provided to you by people that you expect it to come from, I guess. This video is already getting pretty long, so I'll probably just leave this with one last thing that I have learned since becoming a first-time mum, and that is that whether you're a single parent or you've got a partner, you really need to go into this with thinking that you're going to be doing everything on your own, because at the end of the day, you don't know what family members are going to be around. You don't know what friendships are going to stay, and you also don't know where you're going to end up. I mean, I started off in a town where I had my parents, I had my siblings, I had friends, I had good playgroups to go to, regular playgroups, and if I had have gone into pregnancy thinking that that would all have been forever, then, I mean, I was wrong. If that's what I thought that it was going to be, and it was probably what I thought it was going to be, but so much changes, and even coming down to things like you don't know how long your children's grandparents are going to be around for. And I mean, my parents aren't that old now, and neither are my siblings, but I mean, Tom and I could be in a car crash tomorrow. You don't know how long you're going to be around for your children, and so you really need to have a lot of things in place, like having your will in place of who's going to be their legal guardian. And it does matter at this age whether they're 3 weeks old or 6 months old, but you also need to remember that sometimes family aren't going to be your biggest support. And my family are amazing. Even though they're 3,000 kilometers away, they still call, they still FaceTime Hunter, they still do a lot of things. But there's other parts of our family that they don't really have anything to do with Hunter, and it's not because we've stopped them or anything. It's just purely that that's just how it is, I guess. There even friendships, there's some friends that we were friends with from really early on in high school, and some of them dropped off the face of the earth before Hunter was even born. Everything changes. I had a friendship that was for 5 years long, and we had kids literally a month apart, and we were the best of friends. We called each other all day, every day. Everything was going to be awesome. We were going to raise our kids together. We did so much. Like, we literally spent almost every single day together, and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, something big happens, and bam, there goes your best friend. They're gone. So you definitely need to, even though it takes a lot of support to raise a child, you also need to be prepared to do it on your own, because sometimes it's not going to work out the way that you wanted it to, and you can set yourself up as much as you want before you have your baby, but you always need to be prepared for that to change. We did not expect to move 3,000 kilometers away from my parents. We did not expect any of it. We didn't even expect to move 3,000 kilometers away and then 6 months later move towns again. Like, it's just the way that it's happened. So that is something that has been really important for me, is to realize that even though there's a lot of people there for you during pregnancy, sometimes that doesn't mean that they're going to be there after the baby is born. And that doesn't just go for friends, that goes for family, that goes for support networks. Like, doctors can move if you have an amazing doctor, or a playgroup can shut down even though it's a really good playgroup. So there's so much that can change, and you really need to go into it open-minded that at the end of the day, your child just depends on you, and you need to be in a situation where you can handle that. So this video is getting way too long now. I'm not going to add any more in, but I'm happy to do another video if you guys would like to see it on other things that I've learned since becoming a first-time mum. There is so much to learn and so much that is not in books, and I think that one day I'll really love looking back on these kinds of videos and just realizing that there are so many things that I have learnt as a mum, even though some days you feel like the only thing that you've done is fed and bathed and changed a baby. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know one thing in the comments down below that you have learnt since becoming a mum, or if you're expecting a child, then feel free to drop any questions down below and I'll happily answer them as much as I can. If you have not already subscribed, it's free. Just click the red button down below and the bell next to it and you'll be notified whenever I come out with a new video. I have 4 new videos every single week, Monday, Wednesday and Friday, 6:45 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. I hope to see you in the next video.